But first, to our top story. 7 Action News investigator Scott Lewis uncovers new information about a mysterious stranger who is leading police to ask more questions in the murder investigation of Jane Bashara. We have live Team 7 coverage. Dave Llewellyn has more on what we know about her husband, Bob Bashara.
But we're going to begin with 7 Action News investigator Scott Lewis, who has uncovered more on this developing story. Scott, what is this about a mysterious stranger we keep hearing about?
Well, he was in the neighborhood, Carolyn, offering a sizable reward, and the woman I talked to said she was taken aback by that and really surprised because it was just a few hours after the body was found, and in the last week or so, she has heard nothing about any reward. I'll tell you more about that man in a minute. Right now, information we uncovered today from a woman who gave something about a possible timeline of when Jane Bashara's SUV was found in that alley. Bob Bashara told police he talked to his wife on the phone around 4:30 p.m. on the day she disappeared. This woman says her daughter saw Jane Bashara's Mercedes SUV abandoned in this alley about 4 hours later.
On her way home from work Tuesday night between 8:30 and 9, she saw the Mercedes trucks hanging out the alley.
She was sure about the time?
Yes, because she come home around that time every day.
This woman says a few hours later, around 11:15, when she was watching 7 Action News, her dog started barking wildly, looking out this rear window toward the alley where the Mercedes was dumped. When she let the dog out, it ran straight to the rear corner of the yard facing the alley.
Wherein as she was seeing something out there, as if she was seeing something, and she stayed there about a half of a minute, and she ran back like something had frightened her.
Around 8 o'clock the next morning, she says, she went to the backyard and saw the front end of the Mercedes SUV. Later that afternoon, hours after the body was discovered, she got a visit from a stranger as she was backing out of her driveway. A white man driving a white SUV pulled up in front of her house facing the wrong direction and blocked her driveway. He asked her if she knew anything about what happened in the alley behind her house.
He said, well, ma'am, if you know and can lead anyone to the arrest and conviction of the person that killed my friend, you have a $10,000 reward.
The man handed her this scrap of paper with the Grosse Pointe Academy logo and address on one side, his first name and phone number scribbled on the back. The incident made the woman uncomfortable, and that's why she asked us to hide her identity.
I sat and I thought about it, and my whole family told me to be very careful. Do not go out by myself because there's nothing on television about a reward.
Apparently, this man, Jim, talked to a number of people in the neighborhood, and just a little while ago, right before we went on the air, he walked into the Grosse Pointe Park police station and told police, I'm the guy that was offering the reward in the neighborhood. He gave his name, his address, and all of his information. He lives in Grosse Pointe Park, and the police plan to follow up with him. Now, we'll have more on the Jane Bashara case coming out on Action News at 6. Some information on what police found at the crime scene. Carolyn and Joanne, back to you.
Wow. You know, Scott, we talk about a person of interest in the husband in this case who's been called a person of interest. I know Carolyn and I were talking about, I think people maybe say, well, why not a suspect? Why a person of interest? What's the difference between those two terminologies?
Well, it's kind of just semantics in one sense. A person of interest is a little less strong than a suspect. But also, I think what's going on now is that police are focusing on Bob Bashara. There are things about his story that don't add up. And until they get some evidence, I don't think they'll ramp it up and call him a suspect. But right now, they're clearly focusing on him. And that only makes sense because in any murder investigation, they always look at people closest to the person who was murdered. And on top of that, it's very unusual to have a stranger murdered by strangulation. It almost never happens.
All right, Scott, real interesting that you brought up this stranger, Jim, who you said just walked into the police department. But can you tell us anything about this neighborhood? You said the stranger went around door to door. What kind of neighborhood are we talking about?
Well, this area is around 7 Mile and Hoover, and according to the people who live here, 10 or 12 years ago, this was a beautiful neighborhood. Oh, it was a solid area with all nice houses. Now it's just about completely devastated. There's, you know, abandoned house after abandoned house, a lot of vacant lots, a lot of burned up houses. So it looks as though whoever dumped the car and the body here knew what they were doing. They were looking for an area where they wouldn't be noticed. And so far we have no eyewitnesses to the car being dumped.
Yeah. Scott Lewis reporting. We look forward to more coming up tonight at 6. Thank you, Scott. And our Team 7 coverage continues now with 7 Action News reporter Dave Llewellyn live in Grosse Pointe Park with more now on what we know about Bob Bashara.
Dave, what can you tell us at this point? What have you learned about this man?
Well, we're beginning to learn a few more things, including his business interests, Joanne. This is one of the buildings that Robert Bashara owns. This is on Mack Avenue in Grosse Pointe Park. There are businesses, some along the ground floor here, along the sidewalk, and up on top there are apartments which are leased as well. State records say Bashara is the principal of the company that owns this building, B&B Investments. Now, Dillon's Raw Bar is a popular spot here in Grosse Pointe Park. It's located at the end of the corner of this small block, if you will. It's the original location of Tom's Oyster Bar as well. Now, the managing partner there tells me that Bashara socially is inside Dillon's Raw Bar a couple of times a month, including once for his duties with the Rotary Club, where he is a board member. Now, as we mentioned, and as Scott Lewis has mentioned, he is considered, Robert Bashara, a person of interest in this case. David Hiller, the Grosse Pointe Park police chief, told me a short time ago that his detectives today are following up on leads, tips, and evidence that has been collected so far in this case. It's a joint investigation, of course, with Grosse Pointe Park Police and Detroit homicide investigators. Out of respect for the family is pretty much being left alone by police officers as their work continues today for visitation and tomorrow as well for the funeral for the wife of Robert Bashara. But this investigation is continuing, and again, we're learning more about Robert Bashara from friends and from, in this case, tenants in the building he owns here on Mack Avenue. We're live in Grosse Pointe Park. Dave Llewellyn, 7 Action News.